Our next speaker is exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Dr. Gregory. Well, he is the professor of computer science, formerly dean and chairman of department at Maharishi International University. Currently the dean of education, AI technology at Maharishi International University. He is a strong consulting professional with PhD focused in engineering science from Purdue University. Let's go ahead and welcome him on board.
Good morning. It's very pleasant and an honor to be with you here, and we've had such good talks and presentations by the other speakers. My topic, as shown here, is the evolution of education and fulfilling our mission and goals in a changing environment. And the main idea is that all of the different kinds of technologies and inputs and teaching methods and things that we've learned over the past years, particularly decade perhaps, but most importantly, the last few years with all of the different factors changing for us in higher education, they're an impetus for us to look at what should we be doing in higher education, not just how do we do it, not just what are the tools that we have, but in fact, what goals should we be having for achieving with those? And so many factors coming, some of them from educational areas, some of them from the global pandemic, of course, affecting so much, every aspect of higher education and our institutions of higher education. And I'll speak primarily about what I know is going on, in the US, but I think it's mirrored and reflected in all institutions globally around the world. And not only has there been a doomsday call, basically, for higher ed with colleges closing, faculty being released and let go, student enrollments being declining, sometimes by as much as 30% at universities. It's really a time for some soul searching, if we wanted to put it that way, some thinking on a bigger scale, not just about how to restore, quote unquote, what's normal, and discussions have been what is normal, what should normal be? Should we try to, in fact, be moving back to what we were doing before? Or maybe this is a time to look up and look around and find new things to be aiming for. And all of these changes that we've seen, some of them positive, some of them, as I said, impacting in a negative manner. Technology has been a plus because there's been so many areas where technology has improved and given us new things to do. Some of the talks earlier talked about technology and MOOCs and online technology and so on. But with all of this has come increasing costs for education as well. And this, again, in the US is a major focus of, does college cost too much? Should it be affordable for everyone? And in fact, at the presidential level, there's talks of, should we have free college, free universities? And many, many implications of that in terms of equity, in terms of accessibility, and so on. So these are driving governmental and legislative policies as well. And of course, the pandemic meant that many colleges either shut down or completely changed their operations over the last year. And what should we be doing now? In the US, we're about 60% back to vaccination rates. Some colleges requiring it for attendance, others not. Governments stepping in and providing rules, whether you're even allowed to ask students about that. So student expectations on campus, off campus, remote, in-person, live, cost, enrollments, student finances. All of these together say that it's really time for higher education to come to a nexus where we look at what are we doing it well, and what should we be doing? Many of these advancements and innovations that we have, including things like virtual reality and augmented intelligence, so-called AI, and augmented reality, blockchain for micro degrees, so many options we have going forward. And just this technology market is commented here that almost $90 billion, that's a lot of money, 90 billion US in 2020, and is expected to continue to grow beyond that. So how do we put all these things which are in this soup of influences pushing us to move forward and opportunities to move forward at the same time? The most important thing is to choose our proper direction. There's a saying, or perhaps humor, that says, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know when you get there, and you won't know how to get there. So what we need to do is examine our very fundamental goals and strategies and aims of the university. The global tech market can help us with that. And here again, it points out that growing to over 110, almost $110 billion by next year. And we look at all the players there are. We know some of the main ones: edX, Coursera, MIT, HarvardX, so on. But then there's many, many so-called OPM, platform management companies, which are coming along to support and supplant our delivery of education. So then we need to ask, what is it we want to deliver? Not just what tools do we have. There's again, a sort of historical joke that says when you use technology, you don't want to build a mechanical horse, something that moves that way, but mechanize it. You don't want to mechanize and automate old practices. You want to, in fact, use that to move into a new paradigm, a new way of thinking, a new goal, and a new way of achieving it. That means we have to make sure that our change actually becomes evolution. And all of this technology that we have is only one factor in that. And as we know, as administrators and faculty in higher education, that adapting faculty to new approaches and norms is also quite challenging. Students' expectations are growing and are different, and different generations of students that have grown up on keyboards are quite different than students that grow up in passive lecture situations in the past. Society and workplace expectations for performance and what students should know coming out, and the institutions themselves, that workplace and when students get hired in professional life, expectations there. Is liberal arts a good approach to education? Should students have a wide foundation in the arts or just be technically trained? These are all key decisions that decide what colleges should do and what we should be aiming to do with these new factors that we have. And many small colleges in the US are closing because they just aren't attracting students and they can't balance all of these new factors. So we need to adapt, but when we adapt, what should we be adapting to? Are these short-term disruptions, or should these be long-term changes? And I'm proposing the latter, that we don't want to attempt to recreate what we were doing for the last decade or two or three or four. We want to look at re-examining our overall goals and the missions of our university. This phrase that's oftentimes quoted, necessity is the mother of invention. Perhaps we're at that point now where it's necessary for us to do that. That means that our institutions have to find methods of rapid problem solving and innovation, self-examination, examination of the impacting factors coming to us from society, legal, etc., professional. And from that, coming up with revised vision and commitments to meet these goals. This means policy shifts at every level of the institution, and systemic change across it, faculty level, administrative level, leadership levels. And we need to find the support for this innovation. That would mean on our boards of trustees, as well as internal to the institution itself. One of the publications in the US gives the description that the pandemic and financial crisis and reckoning over equality and race have given us a crisis that higher education needs to have. They go on to describe long-standing problems that we've known about and perhaps haven't addressed so effectively, and that somehow institutions may need a crisis to bring us out of that stasis of what we've been doing before. It's almost like health. Sometimes it takes a health crisis and someone adapts a new exercise scheme, a new diet, and they get on a better overall lifestyle. Maybe this is our nexus for higher education in a similar manner. So these opportunities for change mean that we have to really take them as opportunities, not just as a threat. And we have to avoid allopathic remedies. We have to treat whatever the underlying overall structure and situation we're in, not just individual situations, not finance as opposed to education, as opposed to outcomes, as opposed to teaching methods, as opposed to using technology. All of these together. This means we need to look at a top-down, university-wide institution review and restructuring. And mission-driven means we should think big. And of course, we have to stay practical. We have to be able to make it work with finances and enrollment and so on. So speaking about this idea of thinking big and embodying that in our mission, what really is the goal of higher education? And it should be more than just, yes, I delivered daily classes in math and physics and so on in every area. It needs to be stepping back and looking that our education needs to provide citizens which are improved for an improved society, for an improved world. And if we look outward and we look at the world and we look at media as informing us of the status and directions of that, there's clearly many good opportunities for improving on that. The goals need to be much more than just intellectual. We need to have social, emotional, and balance and health for all of our students. And this may require a better way of thinking about how we teach and what we teach. And again, we should think big. What can our institution do to create a better world? And are we being successful at it? We have many stakeholders. We have the students, their parents, society, industry, government, and our own self-defined mission, where we decide what should we be doing as an institution over not just this year and next year to meet these short-term challenges, but in fact, how should we be defining our mission, why we exist and what we're doing? Oftentimes missions are very grand and abstract and vague and some advertising tagline that we do, but are they really based in anything? So we don't want to claim the mission of our university is to improve the world, but are we doing it, and do we have a path forward to achieve that? These values then would drive our mission. And what's the most basic value in education is the student. And what's the most basic value of that student? It's their intelligence, it's their awareness, it's their consciousness, we could say. If we look at the three main elements of education, analyzing it this way, one would be the content, what it is that we're delivering. And what we're delivering, we have lots of technology for that we mentioned earlier. So discipline content is readily available and easy to access. And how do we deliver it? Well, again, technology has added many new things to support us in that area. And in fact, teaching methods have somewhat, in some cases, evolved to help support that. But of these, the content, what we're delivering, how we're delivering it. The third is who we're delivering it to, the student. And what do we have? What technology do we have for improving them the same way that we've improved all of these other areas, for improving their intelligence, their clarity, their creativity? Oftentimes these are called soft qualities. Soft meaning really the human qualities, the subjective qualities. Sometimes the term emotional intelligence is used for that. And it means that education should not just be book learning of objective knowledge, facts, figures, methods, equations, but it should be the soft skills of the person themselves, of the student. Are we improving the student as they go through our educational institutions? Are we improving their intelligence? Not just what they know, but their ability to know. And in fact, in the past, this has been thought as being, we can't do it. But now we find that with science, there's a new theory and new evidence and data that student intelligence can be improved. And just like we wouldn't teach 100-year-old science of Newtonian, we teach modern physics. We need to unify ourselves to use this same thing for improving the way we teach and how we address students. So this new model is what we call consciousness-based education. And this idea of consciousness means the student's fundamental awareness, their ability to know things. And how would we do that? Well, we could think of the brain as being really their CPU. I'm a computer teacher, and the brain is a complicated thing. And how can we, in fact, somehow find a way to make their brain more effective, to make their thinking more clear, to make their awareness more effective, make their creativity greater? So what would this mean, and how can we accomplish it? And in our system of what we call consciousness-based education, in other words, based on this fundamental value, we can take something like Maslow and expand it and say the most fundamental value is consciousness. From that is the student's awareness, what they're aware of. Then that comes their intelligence, then their knowledge, what they can learn, and from that, the creativity as they apply it and extend it. However, it's not just, this doesn't replace other things, but it expands it. So we take Maslow's structures of learning, and they're based on this. So what the student can know and do is based on somehow developing and expanding their awareness, their consciousness, their intelligence. One way to measure this is the EEG coherence of their brain. Again, the brain is like our CPU. And so this is a simple method. It's science-based. It's not some opinion or philosophy. And we describe this as total brain development. It's something that we can achieve, and it's something we can verify. And here's one of our students being measured. We, in fact, have a brain development report card students can request. And the point is that increased brain coherence, increased effectiveness of the CPU, so to speak, is a direct result of a transcendental meditation program that we have all students practice, a part of their academic classes on campus. The phrase transcendental meditation is a little perhaps abstract for modern education, but what it means is transcendental means beyond thinking. It means it's not an intellectual thing. It's not mindfulness, thinking about something or wishing or hoping or dreaming. It means letting the mind settle down, just settle down and become more coherent within itself. Very simple, well documented over the last 50 years, and we've now added it to our academic curriculum. And research has shown then that this increases basic skills and academically reduces dropout rates and graduation rates because it increases intelligence, creativity, and intelligence. In fact, it's been shown that optimization of brain function in this way, by increasing EEG coherence, it increases grade point average, moral reasoning, and again, there's an outcome that we want as our university to be providing to society and for global welfare and well-being, concept learning, and so on. So educational outcomes, personality outcomes, societal outcomes. And just looking at the specifically educational and personality things in terms of standard personality measurements, intelligence goes up. Intelligence goes up. This is something never seen before. Intelligence doesn't go up at a university. What we've learned with it, that does go up, but what the ability to learn doesn't go up. So it's a new thing. Fluid intelligence, practical intelligence, and so on. So this actually changes the whole equation of teaching. It improves the receiver of education as well as our processes of teaching. And that means that we would expect to see outcomes. And here's some outcomes shown, for instance, at one of many of hundreds of applications of this in schools in the US and in other countries globally, where this consciousness-based education technique was applied in fall 2007. This is a middle school. And GPA and performance by students had been going down, and then it goes immediately back up. This technique was called quiet time because students were given the option of what they wanted to do during that time. And the group of students measured, particularly for this test, were practicing this meditation technique. So they were experiencing not just the activity of learning and studies and assignments, but then that quiet time along with it to become more balanced. And the final result then was that we are creating in all of these schools more intelligent, more balanced, more creative students. That means that our alumni really are contributing to the world in such a way via society to create a better world, which should really be the goal and the mission of higher education. After all, higher education should mean not just more and more data, more and more content delivered to students, but creating better and better students, creating a world. And this fulfills the mission really of higher education, which should be to create a better world and better society for everyone. There's a well-known phrase by U Thant, the previous Secretary General of the United Nations. He says, wars start in the minds of men. It is so clearly and obviously true, and yet it's something we haven't addressed. We've tried to address it on the level of policies, on the level of procedures, on the level of force and military and so on. But we need to be able to create these more balanced, more intelligent students that will guide us and lead the world in a better way. So this is our experience here at our university, and something we pioneered, and it's been thoroughly researched again over the last 2 decades with well-published areas, funded NSF research, National Science Foundation, and Institutes of Mental Health, $26 million of funding for research showing the outcomes of this. So it's not a proposal of an idea or philosophy, but something very concrete that I think universities should consider, review the mission of the university and review ways to achieve it. And that's what, in fact, we've been doing. And I think we've been effective at doing that. And it's not just our own opinion. Again, it's the opinion of published scientific research. So that's the main point I wanted to make, was just that all of the factors we have, which are disruptions sounds like a negative thing. It's a challenge to us. But in fact, it's an impetus for us to step back and review and revise and take an effective new direction. And I've proposed that new direction should be a big one. And it should be something that's very altruistic and yet also practical and achievable. Thank you. And let's see if there's any questions that I could answer or discussion. I'm not sure if I will see these.
Dr. Gregory, the questions are on the chat box.
Okay. Let me I don't see the chat box. Maybe you could read them to me.
The first question, so I will not be able to play that live, but it's on the Zoom chat. Eddie, could you help Dr. Gregory?
Okay, all I'm seeing is the small list of participants.
Samara, can you read the question? Samara, can you read the question?
Well, let me help you with the question. The question says, what can Asian countries do to improve learning and make lessons engaging?
Very good. And I think what I would say is that all countries, in fact, we have been to many of these countries, can use this technique. The basic question is that student learning is not determined by the faculty. It's not determined by how much the faculty lectures or how clear they lecture or what LMS they use. It's really determined by the student's ability to understand and to digest and to apply what's being learned. So again, it's this basic idea that says, focus not only on the content and the delivery methods, faculty and teaching, but also focus on the student. Add that third element. And we described here a technique for making their brain more coherent, just by having them settle down and experience that more silent level while they're studying in their classes. And then the research that shows that, in fact, at a large longitudinal study at a US university, intelligence quotient, IQ, went up by almost 10 points. That's 10% over a 4-year period. Control group, almost nothing or went down a little because of the stress of learning in graduate school. So it actually can change the student's ability to know and their ability to learn and perform and be creative. And that means not just in school, but it means also when they go out to work. Let me read the next question here. It says, ensuing educational disruption raises important issues about relationship between education and technology. Do I see a difference developing in the relationship between these two? Well, yes, I think clearly there is, and some of the talks that we've heard on MOOCs, for instance, shows how MOOCs that have employed AI for automatic grading and automatic feedback, MOOCs that imply big data for analyzing student performance and engagement in a course, they can change and improve many aspects and therefore widen our audience and our effectiveness of delivery. But again, I would point out that technology doesn't change the student's learning capability. That's something we have to have a proven and verifiable and scientific method for them to do. And that's the thing I'm pointing out here that's different. we don't have an idea of something good for students. We have a proven model logic with scientific research and verification. I like that idea that our students can go in and have their brain coherence measured at the beginning of a 4-year curriculum, and then at the end have it measured again to show to them and to us that in fact their coherence, their ability to think clearly has improved, as well as on standard psychological tests. Another question, or maybe it's the same one, says, do we have time to do another one here?
Yes, we do have.
Oh, good, good. It says COVID has increased the pace and accessibility, decentralized, unmanageable. This could lead to higher risk of unmanageable failures in either physical or social systems that underpin survival. Well, you know, again, I would say there's three. I'll come back to my premise. There are three main elements of education at any level. There's content, there's delivery mechanisms, which is mostly what people think of as technology, and there's the student. I'm addressing here mostly that subjective development of the student should not be considered something which is exclusive of technology. We now have a simple procedure, measurement, metrics for developing the student, the same way that we might measure and develop internet or LMS or teaching methods or anything else. So yes, we need to be careful about what content we teach, but as students become more intelligent, they will naturally become more discriminative, and it will help us to then, it will motivate us and push us to maintain better teaching methods and effectiveness. Is virtual learning delivery likely to become mainstream? And I think, yes, and to some degree it already is, but it will not exclude in-person delivery and campus delivery. In the US, the pendulum has swung from, oh, it'll all be online, especially after COVID, to now no one wants to come back. Will there even be brick and mortar campuses? Yes, there will be. Campus education for students is something that gives social values, personal interactions, and I think everyone acknowledges that while much content can be learned online through internet and so on, that social values and personal interactions are learned through personal contact with students, between students and faculty. Do I think it's a teacher who must first change towards being a facilitator? And yes, yes, but maybe not first, but also because if students change, I know when I go in to teach a class, I teach a class I've taught many, many times, and I'm more or less the same. But as the students are brighter and the students are more inquisitive and the students are more discriminative and creative, the class changes. And the class changes because of their growth and their intelligence. And I've mentioned this technique that we use, this consciousness-based education, and it makes such a difference. As students are more alert and not fatigued and tired and coming in from being up all night, but they're more alert because they were on a good schedule and they meditated in the morning, their questions are much more clear, more probing, more in-depth, and their appreciation for the knowledge is so much better and such an inspiration to me as a teacher. And all of our teachers find that. So teachers facilitate, I like that term that you use, facilitate learning. They don't create it. It's the student that creates learning. And lastly, it says, how can we aspire and improve learning in developing nations? And I would say that it's what I've just gone through. We can inspire them and aspire them to not just adapt more technology, more internet, more software, more online, but inspire them and show them this research where improving the students' improving the student's subjective capability, these soft qualities. That is the key to education. And in many countries around the world, it's already being adapted and being shown to be very successful. So thank you very much. I hope this has been of some value to you.
It was a pleasure having you on our platform. Thank you for coming and sharing insights. I'm sure everybody is delighted to have you on board and to listen to your session. Thank you so much once again.